Hello, I'm Vincent Price. We're on the Giant Dipper roller coaster at Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk in California. You know, I found another way to make people scream on the Great American Thrill Ride. So why don't you join us as America screams? I guarantee you have nothing to lose except your nerve. You know, I've always loved amusement parks, and especially roller coasters. I celebrated every birthday from my 7th year to my 17th at Forest Park Highlands in St. Louis, Missouri. And then later on, with my kids in tow, we sampled more than our share of big and small amusement parks all over the country. You know, for 100 years now, Americans have been enjoying amusement parks and their thrill rides. It all started on a beach very similar to Santa Cruz, except 3,000 miles away in New York City. It was called Coney Island. And it was in the 1860s that the people of New York were finding relief from the crowded city life by taking their weekends at Coney Island Beach. Ocean swimming was a new sport for the American people, and the girls in their scanty swimming suits were creating a new kind of American scenery. Thanks a million. You see, even a gourmet cook never loses his taste for a good old American hot dog. It was in Coney Island in 1867 that the hot dog was invented by a young pie vendor named Charles Feltman, who experimentally put a Vienna sausage into a Kaiser roll. Now, he called his new food concoction Red Hots. But when a newspaper article questioned what the content of the meat was, the term hot dog was invented. Now, Coney Island's other famous invention came along in 1884, when a Sunday school teacher named Lamarcus Thompson invented the roller coaster. Even though it was just 30 feet high and 450 feet long, it caused wonderful shrieks and screams, and it became America's first thrill ride. From there on, it was non-stop madness. Soon Coney Island began to overflow with roller coasters and thrill rides, and by the turn of the century, it became America's first amusement center. Actually, Coney Island consisted of 3 separate amusement parks: Steeplechase Park, Luna Park, and Dreamland. Steeplechase Park was the first of these when it was opened in 1897 by George Tilliou, the founder of the American amusement park. His Steeplechase Park was famous for having the first fun house, called the Pavilion of Fun. Steeplechase Park's top bill ride was the Steeplechase Horse Race. Another strange contraption at Dreamland was called the Leapfrog Railway. The two cars didn't have anywhere to go but towards each other, but they took care of that. Luna Park featured the Shoot the Chutes. It was such a popular ride that even the elephants got in on it. By the Roaring '20s, due to Coney Island's success and the fame it achieved worldwide, there were over 1,000 amusement parks across the United States. Americans were involved in a love affair with roller coasters, and so every amusement park claimed to have the highest, longest, fastest, greatest, the ultimate roller coaster. One of these coasters certainly succeeded in being the most frightening. It was the Cyclone of Crystal Beach near Buffalo, New York. And it was so terrifying that a nurse was kept in attendance at the station to assist the fainters. And of course, the food staple for the thrill-seeking coaster-riding Americans was the good old American hot dog. Many of those great traditional amusement parks which followed in Coney Island's footsteps are today still among the best in the country. Like Lagoon, out west in Salt Lake City, Utah, many were built by trolley and railroad companies away from the city at the end of their lines in order to give people an incentive to ride them on the weekends. Such parks were simply termed trolley parks. Across the Rocky Mountains from Lagoon is Elitch's Gardens in Denver, Colorado, another of the traditional amusement parks. Not a trolley park, Elitch's began simply as a flower garden in 1890. And by the 20s, rides were added, and it blossomed into a full-fledged amusement park, although the emphasis on the garden atmosphere remains. The Elitch Theater became the Western showcase for Broadway, and today is America's oldest summer theater, while the Twister roller coaster is one of the best rides in the country. Besides being an exciting ride, it's a beautiful coaster. Any art lover can appreciate its structural beauty and carefully designed woodwork. You know, roller coasters have that rare combination of artistic design for a practical purpose. Screaming. Let's take a ride on the Twister. And if you can, take a look around and enjoy its physical beauty. who designed the Twister is acknowledged as one of the great designers of wooden roller coasters, Mr. John Allen.
The design of a roller coaster is very simple. Of course, we have to thank Isaac Newton for most of it, although now, with space-age technology, they say that he wasn't always correct in his formulas for gravity. However, until something better comes along, I still use his formulas. The Mr. Twister in Denver, Colorado, was originally designed as a figure eight with a lot of curves. However, in the first year, it turned out to be a dud. And this is the one reason why I say that curves do not do anything for people. So we added on to the original coaster, which was 72 feet high, went up 98 foot 6, and added straight coaster, in other words, a regular traditional coaster to it, and blended in with the curved ride. The Great American Scream Machine, built in Atlanta, Georgia, is one of the highest at that time that I had designed. This is a very fast ride, very high drops, and comes into the brakes on a 45-foot radius curve, which really ends up the ride with a lot of screams. Really, in a coaster, the lines that I put on paper do not mean very much unless the contractors and the builders that are going to follow these lines do follow them very precisely. The Rebel Yell at King's Dominion is a straight out and back coaster, although it is a double track coaster, placed side by side where two trains race each other from beginning to end.
I'll never forget one time, I was so enamored of the amusement park called POP, Pacific Ocean Park, on the Santa Monica Pier in California, that when I read it was going to close, I went down the last day to sort of say goodbye to the old girl, and I conned the concessionaire of the roller coaster to let me take the last ride alone. Well, it turned out to be the last ride, because as we came to the top of the first big rise, the car stopped. And I had to get out and climb down the rickety old wooden structure with the sea thundering down below. It was marvelous fun. Unfortunately, several hundred roller coasters and amusement parks met the same fate as Pacific Ocean Park and Palisades Park. And the 1,000 parks of the 1920s dwindled down to just 200 by the 1950s. Most of them were sadly torn down, while still others met a more violent death. For a while, it looked like amusement parks were to become a thing of the past. But in 1955, a man named Walt Disney opened a park which became the most famous amusement park in the world, Disneyland. Unlike the previous traditional amusement parks, Walt Disney's idea was to divide Disneyland into specific themes, around which he fit the rides and attractions to blend into that theme, whether it be the rivers of Frontierland or the world of Tomorrowland. As the first theme park, Disneyland was a monumental success and led the way for a second rapid growth across the country, this time of theme parks. All of the new rides introduced by theme parks across the country have led to a second mad race to present the ultimate roller coaster, particularly in the new steel models. The runaway mine train eventually led to the Speed Racer, which introduced very tight spirals along its course, such as the Big Bend of Six Flags Over Texas. Soon, steel coasters started going upside down, like Cedar Point's Corkscrew. The Corkscrew led to the vertical loop coasters, of which there are all types and varieties across the country. The Loch Ness Monster of Busch Gardens in Virginia features interlocking loops. The Shockwave of Six Flags Over Texas has 2 consecutive loops. The Mindbender of Six Flags Over Georgia in Atlanta has 1, 2, 3 loops. However, the steel coaster I personally find the most wonderfully terrifying is what is known as the shuttle loop, such as the King Cobra of King's Dominion in Virginia. You see, it's one thing to go forward through a vertical loop, but then to travel up a dead-end track, stop, and fall through the same loop backwards. That's smart.
I'd like to welcome you to the King Cobra and ask that you sit up straight, stay straight ahead, keep your heads against the headrest, and your hands on the paddle bars in front of you. Okay, if everyone's heads against the headrest and your hands on the paddle bars, enjoy your ride on the King Cobra.
Although it's absolutely true that roller coasters are the main draw, amusement parks and theme parks like King's Dominion still find it important to appeal to the whole family by offering as many different kinds of entertainment and amusement as they possibly can. Roller coasters, however, still remain the king of the amusement and theme park, especially those space-age supersonic steel monsters. Now, the company that designs and builds these delightful terrors is the Arrow Development Company in California.
The Runaway Mine Train and the Flume Ride were Arrow's first rides that really got us into the large amusement park rides. It's sort of interesting how they came about. In the case of the Flume Ride, Carl Bacon, who was at that time president of the company and one of the founders of the company, happened to be watching a television program on the logging industry in the Northwest. And he was watching how the lumberjacks, to get their kicks, would ride the logs down the flume. And Carl thought, wouldn't that make an interesting ride if we could convert it into an amusement park ride? Well, within 4 years, we were testing sections of a model, and from that it developed into small, medium, and extremely large flume rides, of which we have more than 50 scattered around the world at the present time. The Runaway Mine Train ride was duplicating what existed in some of the mining areas throughout the West and other parts of the country, where the vehicles were made to resemble an ore car body and allow the people to ride in that and experience what many miners had experienced, much to their dismay, when the system got out of control and ran away. The Runaway Mine Train was the forerunner of the corkscrew because it was our first all-steel coaster system. We have developed with the corkscrew upside-down rides, which seem to be very popular in amusement parks nowadays. And one of the new systems that we're working on right now is a launch system where the trains start off in a loading area approximately 60 feet off the ground, are catapulted from that area down a track by a system quite similar to what they use to catapult an airplane off an aircraft carrier. New rides, the major rides, and the promotable rides for amusement parks have become extremely expensive. And because they are so expensive, here again they need to be highly promotable, and they need to have capacity. Capacity is a function of how many people per unit time leave the station, pure and simple. It's not how long the system is, it's how many people per unit time leave the station. A ride that may cost $1 million should have at least 1,500 an hour capacity. Sometimes in the development of a new ride concept, we can come very close to the new track configuration by using the scale model railroad track. From this, we then make it into a model and also convert it into an artist's conception, such as we're doing here on this ride, which we're working on now. Sometimes we find it difficult to originate a conception on a two-dimensional drawing, so we will make a static model so that other people can understand it. When we come up with an idea for a new thrill ride, or screen maker, if you will, such as a suspended coaster, one of the first things that we do is that we come up with an artist's conception of the ride. Then many times we find that to check the ride dynamics, we make a scale model such as this. Pete, can you let it drop now? We made a full-scale test section for the prototype suspended coaster because one of the most important things we needed to check was how it felt. That's all important in a thrill ride. If it looks fantastic but doesn't feel good, then it's not going to be a popular ride, and the parks won't want it because their patrons won't want to ride it.
The race for the ultimate roller coaster is stronger now than it was even during the 20s, as one theme park after another strives to achieve the ultimate. All of the older roller coasters were made of wood because wood was easier to work with in the early 1900s, and it was less expensive than steel. With today's advances in technology and with lumber prices, that's no longer true. Yet parks still lean towards wooden roller coasters because everyone knows that a real, honest-to-goodness, original roller coaster just has to be made of wood. Douglas fir from the Oregon forest is preferred because of its flexible durability. It gives a coaster both supportive strength and a smooth ride. The tracks themselves are also wooden and are formed by bending boards stacked 7 high. On top of these boards, a metal strip is laid, on which the top wheels of the train run. The train also has side wheels to keep it on its course, and under wheels to keep them from leaving the track. This one. It's called Colossus. Please don't be afraid to scream. I mean, after all, that's what scream makers are for. By now, we've found out that nothing can make me scream. Nothing. Not even the highest, longest, fastest